Hello and welcome everyone to episode. At this point, I think it's not. I'm absolutely uncertain between 9 and 10. It's an episode of the Odds and Ends podcast where we talk about important things and the chance they happen. And we're back with the wonderful Scott Eastman. Scott is a Superforecaster. He is a clear and deliberate thinker who is unafraid to put probabilities on things. And it's a real joy to have him back. I think Scott should go on loads more podcasts. I think he's a great guest. If you're running a podcast, you should try and ask him to come on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sort of catch up with the state of Ukraine. We're going to think about what's happened now. We might talk a little bit about the first podcast, which I don't know. I think these podcasts age out pretty quickly, so I don't know whether I recommend you listen to or not. But whatever. Scott, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing
or
fine.
Maybe this evening for you.
Oh yeah, it's actually morning for me. I'm in Oregon this time. Sometimes I'm usually in Romania, but yes, I'm on the west coast of America. Basically I'm doing fine. Some of my forecasts I don't think are doing fine from last time, and it's still.
I think it's a good thing, because then when we've had other guests who haven't been super forecasters, it's been like, look, everybody's forecast to point forecast is it's hard 6 months in the future.
Yeah. So I'm basically at a stage now where it's like everything is going. A lot of things are happening. Ukraine is making progress, but the progress is something that doesn't show. Let's just say it doesn't show. It's really slow, and it's hard to say in the next month or two, will there be significant kilometers taken or not? And if you look at the total map, this total land area that Russia currently has, it hasn't really changed since the last podcast by more than just a small number of square kilometers. And that would look, let's say, completely insignificant. In reality, Russia had all winter and spring to build up substantial defenses, as probably most people know. And so getting through the first several, kilometers or miles is extremely difficult. And some things that have not come into play that I would have hoped would have started to come into play or sooner. One of them is air power. Ukraine still does not have air power. When I say they don't have air power, obviously they have some airplanes, they have some helicopters. I'm not trying to diminish the people that are involved in that, but they have not been able to get and be trained on significant numbers of F-16s to this stage. And it looks like, from what we know, probably spring would be the earliest that's going to come into play very much. And so it's really galling to me to keep hearing people from the West say, they're not making as much progress, but we've given them everything that they need. And it's like, of course you haven't given them everything that they need. We would never be fighting without significant air power. So when you're trying to take on defensive lines, going through very, very well built up lines, and the people can also hit you from above, that's you're at a significant disadvantage. Now, in reality, both sides have man pads. Both sides have the ability to shoot a lot of things out of the air. So Russia also doesn't really have air supremacy, but that is a setback. It's not a setback, but that's something that's I would say handicapped, or not allowed Ukraine to go forward as fast as they could have otherwise. It would still be difficult, because even if they had air power, substantial air power, you still have to clear mines, and you still have to clear mines in areas where artillery is going to be hitting at you, but they would be much more suppressed. So that is one issue. There's a few other things I don't understand. Like, one of them is we haven't sent in things like ATACMS, long-range artillery, or long-range, those are rockets, but long-range rockets. But those are more about hitting very, very deep behind enemy lines, like hitting deep into Crimea, being able to hit the Kerch Bridge, at will. They have hit the Kerch Bridge already multiple times. But one thing that we haven't sent, which I find really odd, is just D9 cats. So when the U.S. or Israel goes through defensive lines, they tend to use very large caterpillars with big blades on them. They're immensely heavy, extremely armored, not just standard D9 cats like you'd see on a construction site, though that's the base of it, but things that can plow through. They do have substantial equipment from the West, and this is not to say that the U.S. hasn't helped. Great Britain is actually, to some degree, led on this, because Great Britain has given, or United Kingdom, they've given basically Ukraine the ability to hit deeper with things like Storm Shadow missiles, which have had an effect in Crimea. Ukraine controls more of the, I shouldn't say controls, but they've taken away the control of the Western Black Sea from Russia. So that's a big change. But as far as going down towards just north of Tokmak, north of Tokmak, there's progress has been made. Yeah, exactly, right there. There's definitely been progress made, and they made it through the first few really difficult lines. They have to be careful not to. That's a good view there. They have to be careful not to get encircled, because right now they're making progress, and Russia has been retreating. But there's still the chance that if they go in too far without securing the flanks, that they can get essentially encircled, and that's not the situation they want to be in. I don't think that's going to happen. But you can even see on this map, there's still additional lines, to get through. And right now, we're recording this. I can't remember today. It is the 21st of September. There's still probably, a month and a half, 2 months, hopefully, of decent weather, but that's hard to say. It's we will get into rainy season. There's nothing that says you have to stop fighting even when there's snow and all of this. It just makes it much, much more difficult. And they're aware. We see the lines as they are right now. You want to say the lines, we see the defensive lines. So on this map, you see black lines, and the black lines are where there's different trenches and lines of defense that the Russians built up over last winter. And if things come to a pause for this winter for many months, there's probably going to be another series of lines. And what's critical on this right now, which probably people who follow this carefully would know, is Ukraine has a desire to go from their furthest point south now to get to the Sea of Azov and block the route of Russia to have a land bridge to Crimea. Because if they can go down to basically towards Melitopol, if they can get down to anywhere along the line, if they can break the line to the sea, then Crimea can only be resupplied through two routes: through the Kerch Bridge or through the seas. And the seas, no one really has full control of the seas right now. So anybody who's just
like watching, anybody who's watching this, I mean, there's like a map. I use this thing called the Deep State Map.live. I find it pretty useful. And as Scott says, it's got all the fortifications on it. And so, I mean, I think my sort of context for this, and Scott can disagree, is basically the two interesting things that are happening at the moment are some sort of push from the north to the south, and then there's something about trying to blow up the Kerch Bridge, and I guess there's also something very interesting about sea power maybe. But then there's some other discussion about the Antonovsky Bridge and people trying to land, and I don't think that's super interesting at the moment. I could be wrong, so I disagree. And there's some stuff about Bakhmut, but again, I think that's more sort of PR than the Bakhmut is really strategic. So I think the main thing to think about is the stability. And I think one of the things that happens with Bakhmut, and there's been a bit of a disagreement between some U.S. policy people and Ukrainians, is some people in the U.S. have said, Ukraine should have concentrated everything south of Zaporizhia and just put all of their forces into going through and get to the sea, as fast as possible. Well, there's a couple of things that go against that. One of them is a lot of people would get annihilated because war, always people are going to die in war. The longer it takes, more people are going to die. But essentially, some of the mine clearing stuff is a slow process. But also, if Russia knows everything is going to one point, they will put all of their forces there. And so essentially, there's been small battles going along, throughout the whole lines, and then more concentration in Bakhmut. At some point, Russia was appearing they mounted a small offensive in the far north, and these things basically create enough of a dynamic that neither side can fully focus on one area. And both sides have, they do have supply issues as far as having enough. They've shot enormous numbers of artillery shells and all this, but which artillery shells can run out, but also even the barrels, not so much with with some things, barrels, need to be replaced. So
it's not an unlimited resource of weapons, and so they're trying to keep, both sides are trying to keep each other spread out. Clearly, the main thrust is south of Zaporizhia and going towards Tokmak in the direction of Melitopol. But the other thing with this is if they get within about 50 kilometers, which are already quite close to that, they can essentially strike pretty easily all the way down to the sea, which makes the supply lines very difficult. But that still means striking with pretty expensive missiles. The closer they get to it, even if they don't reach all the way to the sea, the more weapon systems become available that are not high cost. So for instance, the U.S. is still not permitted, has not approved giving them ATACMS, and the ATACMS missiles have a range of, I think. This is terrible. I'm trying to remember if it's in miles or kilometers. It's a giant difference. But 190 kilometers or whatever it is, easily go past. I think it's 100 miles. They can reach basically to the southern tip of Crimea. They can reach the Kerch Bridge without any problem from where they are now. But even if they receive those are very expensive missiles, and so they could certainly hit anything. But it's not like you're going to just be sending hundreds a day. I think. You may be talking about several hundred that they would have in total. They're not going to have thousands and thousands of those. Where artillery rounds, they have, they can basically up into the millions of those. So at that point, you could say like, okay, the closer you get, the more you can just send traditional, weapons against supply lines. So obviously, it would be the hope that you.
Are they gonna take this? I've struggled to understand where the ground lines are. So again, anybody who doesn't have the visuals, I'm sorry to say, but the ground lines, like there's this sort of sausage at the bottom of Ukraine, and there's stuff that moves through that, and then like there's like Crimea below that, and if you can blow up the Kerch Bridge, then everything has, as Scott's already said, has to come through the sausage of Ukraine or come via the sea. And if you can cut the sausage in half and blow up the bridge, then like the whole area can only be supplied by the sea, and it'll be much more difficult. But like, where are those ground lines? Like in that sausage in South Ukraine?
Just straight out roads. I mean, if roads are destroyed, I'm having a hard time seeing with the size. If the map can be zoomed in towards the south a little bit, if you go straight down from Tokmak, keep zooming in. Okay, there you go. And then just go a little bit further south. If you can scroll a little bit further south, it's plenty big now. There's actually, there's roads that come along. Melitopol right now is in the far left corner. In the middle, you can see like a yellow, light yellow road that's coming through. So you could have roads which are going to be, let's say quite easy for transporting, supplies, people, anything. And that is very, very near the coast. So that route, can certainly be used. And right now, it can be hit with expensive missiles, but a road can be rebuilt quite fast, unlike a bridge. So if you're talking about, if it gets pocked, if some rocket hits it, it doesn't take that much to fill holes on a flat surface. It can be slowed down, people can be killed, but it's not like dropping the Kerch Bridge, which would take months to repair, depending on how hard it's hit. Obviously, it's possible to go around. If Ukraine was able to control this entire line that Nathan just drew there, if they actually had their soldiers all the way down to the sea, then clearly Russia would be done in terms of supplying, as we say, through the sausage. That would be over. But even as they get closer, they can make it more and more tenuous to get equipment through there. And like one of the things that's happened in the since January is Russia has learned that if they get too close to certain areas, bad things happen. So if they get within range of HIMARS, if they get multiple launch rocket system, if they get too close and have concentrated groups of commanders there in a building, they may get wiped out. That just happened in I can't remember the location, but in the last few days, they had a group of commanders wiped out, but that's the first time it's happened since January. So they've essentially learned we have to push our lines back further. We have to push our supplies back further, our command and control units.
What
All of
is
this has to go.
What is the range of like that sphere of control? Because if anybody's looking, so the area that's currently been taken is about like 80 kilometers from this like bottom road. So like if the road comes within that sphere of control, I think even if we don't get like Ukrainian troops to the sea, that's a very bad time for Russia.
Because right now that line 80 kilometers is just slightly more than 50 miles, and so and that's within the 50 miles is essentially the outer range of HIMARS, if I remember correctly. And Ukraine doesn't want to bring their most sophisticated equipment right up to the front lines where Russians are, because their equipment can also get hit. Some systems are mobile, so if it's HIMARS on a truck, it can fire and retreat, but it's still vulnerable. If they can launch systems from airplanes, like Storm Shadow can be launched from an airplane. It has a much longer range, but basically, the further south Ukraine can get. So, like if Ukraine, I don't know, I should just clarify. Do you want me to specify everything in kilometers or miles just to keep consistent? I don't know what the general audience is, because if it's,
I guess probably doing both if you can, because I guess we've got Americans and
because Americans and Brits,
kilometers first is easiest for me if you want, but I think we probably should try it.
Yeah, sure. So if I said, okay, if Ukraine makes it another 15 or 20 miles, if they make it another 30 kilometers, and you can see on the map that Nathan has up right now, it's crossed with a white line. There's a road right there where the pointer is.
Tokmak to
just basically just south of Tokmak. So if Ukraine makes it essentially to Tokmak, even if they don't take Tokmak, but they get to that space, just to that general area, right where he drew a line there. If they get down to that point, then that road is no longer going to be functional as a safe route to supply. And then they would have to go to the far south, and a lot of,
and even then that would be
artillery. It'd be within easy range of missiles or rocket systems. It'd be within easy range of rocket systems. So that would already be extremely important.
Something people may not super also get here is like, there's kind of like three lines of trenches and stuff. There's like the top line they've been going through, and then there's this like second line, and then there's like a third line which goes down to Tokmak, and they have tried to like break through the corner of one of these lines over to Verbov, and then like again,
they can go. They hope to go. They hope to go around it. Ideally, they would go around it, but there's also some geographical issues. But they would. The idea would be go around that line. In fact, it's possible to circle back and surround Russian forces. So Russian forces, like, they're already really close to those lines where they're still going to have to do mine clearing and things like this. But already Russia has pushed some of their forces more to the west. Like they don't want to get wiped out either. So, and then the question, like, as you get closer to Tokmak, is it worth taking a city or bypassing it? If you bypass it, it still may be a thorn in your side because people could be constantly attacking you from that city. But the Russians also have to make a decision. If and when the Ukrainians get there, do we want to be encircled and risk, also running out of supplies and dying? So, but I would say essentially, if the Ukrainians can get through the three lines, like they've already gone through two lines. If they can basically get to the third line, they should be able to go relatively unobstructed to what looks like a set of double lines down below. And as far as I know, each successive line is currently less well fortified than the first line was. But if they're going to wait until next spring, that will give the Russians a lot of time to reinforce those lines and build additional lines. Because this map, we're seeing the map only as it is today, not how it would be in several months. If the Russians are having to retreat fast, they don't have time to build substantial fortifications. But if they have, all winter and early spring, it'll make it much more difficult. But Ukraine will eventually get within easy range of the coast for hitting things. Now, all of this doesn't solve the whole problem.
That seems just like worth pausing on there, just for you see that seems like a sort of critical insight is that they might go quickly now, or they might go slowly, and then give Russia a chance to reinforce the area behind. But that every kilometer close to the sea is a kilometer close to the sea in terms of missiles and in terms of, and frankly, if they can get to Tokmak, even if the entire rest of the area is just, even if they never sever the land bridge, so to speak, but the entire area is within the range of even quite expensive missiles, then maybe they can really disrupt. If they hold Tokmak well and they have the area above it, then maybe they can disrupt basically all of the transport going to the south. Right,
that'd become a very difficult area to operate.
Even if
through.
That area is very well fortified, like even if they can never take it with troops, then they can still maybe disrupt it. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then at some point, Russia would have to decide: do we want to put tens of thousands of troops there to prevent further downward push, but at the risk of just having them wiped out without actually accomplishing much because those lines are already somewhat severed, not very functional. So that would be a goal. Then this is obviously not the whole map of Ukraine, because this is going to deal with basically making Crimea very difficult to inhabit, which is already Ukraine is increasing their attacks. They're quite regular attacks on Crimea. They recently hit a submarine. They basically destroyed a submarine. It's not sunk, but it's had a massive hole in the submarine, a smaller ship. And they're having, I think it was yesterday, they had, they're getting basically able to hit, they can basically hit almost anything in Crimea now. Part of it was they took an oil platform recently that helped shut down more, they've been able to shut down some of the sort of west of Crimea. There's a platform out in the sea that allowed Russia to basically, let's say, see further. It had, if you have radars on it, you can destroy they basically just took those. They've also been able to hit some S-300, which are anti-aircraft, anti-missile systems. They've been able to hit some of the systems in Crimea that would normally take out approaching planes, drones, missiles. So over time, Crimea is becoming a less well-defended peninsula, and that's significant. They still haven't fully dropped the Kerch Bridge. They have attacked it multiple times. Russia has made some efforts to protect it, including basically mooring ships along, in front of it. They've done some things to try to make it harder for drone ships or unmanned ships or torpedoes, whatever, to get, basically ships, but to reach it. But it can be hit by missiles. I think it's something that if Ukraine says we absolutely make this our top priority, they can drop the bridge. That's also a tough choice, because if you drop it completely, when I say completely, take it out where it's going to take months to repair. The bridge has three things. It has roads going in each direction, plus it also has a rail bridge. So if all of those were dropped, it also doesn't allow the Russians in Crimea an escape route. And so there's always a question: do you want them to have an escape route? Because as much as
they may want to, they'll fight much more.
Yeah, they'll fight much more, and so as much as they may want to wipe out, the enemy, at some point you may want to allow them an exit, because you still end up losing a lot of people trying to take them out. So Crimea is something that there's been more and more talk from people when I say in the West. I've even just spoken with individuals who don't follow politics very much, don't follow a lot of this stuff very much, and they're like, why isn't it over? Like this, come on, we want to support Ukraine, but this thing has been going on a long time. And a lot of people don't realize wars tend to go on a long time. And so over time, there becomes more pressure to end this. There's certainly pressure in the U.S. Congress right now from some Republicans in Congress, not from all, but from a very vocal group that, this has gone on long enough. We spent enough money, let's stop this. And so, everybody should just negotiate. And so there's been a question, is Crimea worth taking? Crimea, even if Ukraine gets, cuts off the land bridge, cuts off the actual bridge, Crimea is very well defended, and it's not a very ethnically Ukrainian area. It's Russia sent in a lot of their own people. They've populated it over time. Some of the native population there, it was originally Tatar, and so for some, they say Crimea is absolutely essential to Ukraine. This is part of their identity. There's another part about it, which is just simply, can they survive? Can they thrive as a country without it? And one of the reasons that this question comes up is if you look at the Kerch Strait. So there's the Sea of Azov, and then there's this little gap in between. If Crimea is let's say a very, very safe country, everything is going on, or whatever it is. Let's just say it's a neutral place. Nobody's ever going to fight from there, and that strait is left open. And Ukraine eventually regains Mariupol, where they have a large steel industry. Then they could go ahead and say, okay, we can thrive as a steel producing country because we can ship through there. If they can't send ships through there, they're significantly limited in their economic production. And so that's part of a reason where, even if I might, my personal view might be, okay, ethnically, historically, Crimea at times has been not really Russian, not really Ukrainian. Like, should it have its own identity? It's like, from the Ukrainian perspective, this area absolutely needs to be secure. I would say that Zelensky says it actually must be Ukraine, but one way or the other, they're not going to want to stop the war until, even consider negotiating until they know that strait is secure for them to ship through. So I think that's the main push, like between now and winter, is to sever the ability of Russia to supply through the south. When we did the previous podcast, I don't remember how high my rate was, but certainly too high. And part of that was I did think that there would have been more equipment provided. More of the equipment that has already been provided would have come into play. Just including tanks. Like I heard just a few days ago that I think they're finally to the stage where Abrams tanks are going to start entering, the battles, and they're not. That's not the whole solution to the war. But they, probably wisely, Ukraine has not sent everything they have into the battle, because if they sent a lot of the equipment that they have now, it would end up, some of it would get destroyed, and so the path has gone much slower. The lines were actually built quite well. So these were called Solovykin lines, after the guy that looked like Dr. Evil, the general who basically decided, how the defense of this region should go. First of all, I thought that they would have been able to breach those faster than they did. I thought they would have had more possibility, more equipment to do it. And it's hard to say. Like Zelensky in the last few days said there's going to be a very major offensive in the next, I don't know whether he said the coming weeks, but basically in the very short period, we're going to see something that will surprise people, like in its intensity. So I don't know whether that's true. I don't know whether he thinks that they've reached far enough down to make that happen. But even if they get all of that, that still leaves all of the Donbass essentially, with very, very little change. So like Bakhmut is this relatively insignificant town, except at this stage it's become very significant for both countries, because both countries have lost so many people on it and just decided this is this town that's, that we're going to either hold or give up or whatever. And I think both sides have decided that that's an area where they can tie each other up, make the other side lose enough that it's going to be, worth it for them. So I would kind of update my forecast from the past and say, I actually can't read what's on the map. If you can zoom in.
So maybe we'll just briefly we'll briefly look through this. And again,
if you can zoom in,
Scott's
enough that we can read him.
Scott's a great player for being willing to forecast at all. I think we're all going to make bad calls here. So I think your big issue was will the Ukraine make significant gains south before the end of July? And you were sort of pretty confident, 85, very confident, I think. And that, I mean, I think that was
clearly
did
not
wrong.
happen. I will not. I won't even. I won't call a little village as a major city. So that's
So, but then I think that is like most of your error, because you sort of said, if they make significant gains, will they sever that land bridge? You thought that was sort of almost certain, but they didn't make significant gains.
Right.
So therefore, that accounts for the fact your land bridge, you had sort of 75% taking the land bridge this year. I don't know what percentage you are that they take the land bridge this year.
So at this point, I might say, I will say, I think I'm not even going to make a comment on Tokmak. I would say, like, if they gain, if I want to rephrase the question, which is kind of bad because it'd be nice to keep the same one. But if I would rephrase it to say, will Ukraine make it south to the level of Tokmak? South to the level of Tokmak, meaning if they decide to skirt it,
like
if they reach
south,
as far south as Tokmak, which is an easier objective, it's still a very difficult objective. If they make it as far south as that, which I would currently give that about maybe a 40% chance that they make that now. But if they make it as far south as
2024,
before 2024, exactly. But then so this is not that they're going to have the thing fully severed, but will the chance that would then render the land bridge what I want to say essentially unusable. I mean, that doesn't mean that like little tiny small amounts of stuff go through, but essentially not usable for mass supply.
So disrupt ground lines, perhaps, like
I would say
ground lines.
Significantly disrupt ground lines would be if considering that the first one occurs, I would say then that would be like 70% chance that ground lines would land supply would be significantly disrupted.
Right, and so like together, you've got sort of a 28% chance then that like ground lines significantly disrupted.
Right. So I think regardless, supply lines are going to have minor disruptions, because even if they make it another 5 kilometers and they continue to get better supplies from the West, and once again, like hats off to UK for taking the lead and sending better equipment than some other countries have sent. It can be hit, but it can't be. They don't have enough of those. Some of what they have is too expensive to hit it, on a completely regular basis. So, so right now it's like could be minor disruption, but to have essentially render it nearly useless would, be low.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see if there's anything else worth, because I'm sort of building a new one. Regular listeners will know that I just have a real interest in trying to build probability trees. And I think possibly it could be sort of 20 or 50 of these podcasts before we really see something that is like, that is worth doing. But so will it take Luhansk? You said 25%, so probably not. So, I mean, I don't know, you're pretty lower than that now, but that doesn't
I would go even, and I would terrible. Still go, and I would go lower on that. I would probably take that down to like, 5. Because that just clearly has not been made that clearly is not a priority, and I think they are going to continue to do fighting all along the, all along the eastern front, just the front, just to keep it from, to keep Russia spread out, and there's also always a possibility that Russia tries to, not now, but I think we're getting close enough to winter, but there was always a possibility that Russia was going to try to mount an offensive, it's somewhere along the line if they completely just ignored it. But I don't think that they're going to go make any significant gains in the Donetsk area, in the Donbass. So,
what chance do you think of significant of like? I guess those are like massive Donbass gains, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, so taking a major
So
city,
I guess it sounds like you think like 1 to 5% maybe.
Yeah, let's say 7%. One of the things that this is a strange thing that sometimes when we think about percentages, I don't remember when I read this, but very recently, the odds of rolling a 12 with 2 dice is as far as slightly over 3%.
3, yeah,
isn't it 3? And
3.6 was 1/36, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's it's very small, and yet if you told somebody, okay, we know rolling dice, rolling a 12 is low, but it's certainly possible. This is definitely not in the range of. Yeah. Obviously, we've all rolled that many times, and so that's why sometimes even number, like, I think to most people, if you hear 3 or 4%, you're like, oh yeah, that means no. No, this doesn't mean no. So.
My sense is recently I've tried to think about things a lot more like 1/n than necessarily percentages, because the difference between 50 and 51% feels the same as the difference between 89 and 90%, or 99 and 100%. But they, in terms of the amount of confidence required to say those shifts, is a very, very different, right? We 50 to 51%, we move all the time. 98 to 99% is like a huge amount more information. So yeah, I agree with you that it's like.
Well, there have even been studies. I was going to say there have been studies done on the granularity of superforecasters compared to the general population, or compared to average intelligence analysts, and basically, I think they were saying for maybe average intelligence analyst, it'd be 7 levels. And we were supposed to be accurate to roughly 20 meaning like 5% intervals. And and the way that they tested this was to just look at, thousands and thousands of forecasts we made, and said, like, if you basically routed them one way or the other, like, are you going to get, if you went, like, if I said 48 and then you just, instead of 46, was that relevant? And like, no, it wasn't. But if I said, 40 instead of 45, that was relevant. But I would say, like you were just talking about, that's more on, it's the fine granularity is more on the edges. So if I say, 47 or 52, even though those are 5 points apart, and supposedly I'm accurate to, 20 intervals, like, no, between 47 and 52, I don't have a clear view. Between, as you say, between 98 and 100, those are radically different numbers for me. Yeah, so I think the closer we get to the edges, the easier it is. Sometimes the easier it is to for the differences to matter. And in the middle, it's hard. I mean, often when I give a number in the middle, it's like if 50-50 doesn't mean I have no idea, because if I don't look outside right now, or look at the weather forecast for tomorrow, it's already late September. I'd really be surprised if it's going to be 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But I'm not going to say, I don't know what the weather forecast is tomorrow, so I'm going to say 50-50. It's not going to be 100. I've already got enough to say I'm going to bring my number down quite a bit, because it's just simply wrong time of year. But if it's something where I'm really thinking, I have enough information to know it's, kind of could, it couldn't, and I decide to move 3 or 4 points, it may not be that switching from 50 to 47 is an actual, that I actually have enough information to make something very relevant on it. It's almost just more like, okay, this is just nudging something one way. Enough nudges start to become relevant. It's not like a strong signal that should be looked at very highly. If I went from 6% to 2%, that's, really significant. So I don't know if any of that makes any sense or not.
Yeah.
But, so
no, I think it does.
And obviously, when I say we're generally accurate, like, well, clearly we're not accurate on all questions. Like, I was like quite off on how far Ukraine would go south by now. So
is it?
Sure,
but
when we start looking at these things, one thing I saw is U.S. support, and U.S. support is an area that is becoming, to me, more and more concerning. And part of that is, today, President Zelensky is in the U.S., and the Senate is going to meet with him. The full Senate will meet with him, and Republican and Democrat. And in the House, uh, Speaker McCarthy is going to meet with Zelensky, but he refused to have a meeting with the full House with Zelensky, because part of it is he knows that there's enough people within his own party who completely at this point oppose funding Ukraine at all. That I don't know whether he's wanting to avoid the political disunity that would show, both for his own party and his own staying in power, but also in terms of supporting Zelensky. Like it looks like a snub not to invite him to a meeting of the full House, but if he invites him to a meeting of the full House and it turns into big raucous fight over let's pull the plug, that would be worse than what they're planning on doing, which is to say they're going to have a meeting at the National Archives where everybody who wants is invited. Anyone can come see and have their discussion, but somehow they decided if we take it off site, then somehow this is a workaround. But it shows that there are challenges. The House of Representatives is having a challenge passing any budget, and whatever budget they pass has to eventually go through the Senate and get signed by the president. Well, there's a lot of things that President Biden can do on his own, but there are some things that in time, can be a challenge, not just with the general election next year, but even with getting more robust support from Congress, which until now has been pretty good. So I think that also
for anybody, anybody wants some more context, the House is controlled by the Republicans, but it took them a long time to even agree on a person to lead the House for them. And they are quite disorganized. And my understanding of this is a little bit weak, but I think there's basically currently an unforced error in that there may be a government shutdown, not with some sort of standard brinkmanship and standard negotiations. Oh, the president is giving us what he wants, but just what's going to look like pure Republican incompetence. And that doesn't bode well. You need to be able to agree funding bills. If you can't even agree to fund America, then how much can you agree to? So do you have a sense of will the current support, will the US support the current level next summer?
That's an interesting one, because next summer we're going to already be into the election camp. We're always in election.
Right. Yeah.
But it will be intense because by middle of next summer, the primaries will essentially be over. So both sides will have figured out who their nominee is. The general population is not excited about either candidate. So the general population, there's hardcore MAGA people who want Trump to be reelected, but he doesn't have great support among the general populace. He has enough support to currently win the Republican nomination, but he also has all sorts of court cases going on against him. And anyway, so he's. I was just mentioning to a friend today, I've never seen a time where both sides, I feel like, are sitting on time bombs. In Trump's case, it's because of all sorts of reasons, but particularly the lawsuits against him, besides just his general so many problems he's caused. But on the side of President Biden, the Democrats aren't considering to really seriously run another candidate. And the main thing against him is his age. It's just simply he is quite old. He will be, I think, would be 87 by the time he would finish a second term, and so there's a lot of people who say, we appreciate what he's done. It's not that he has had bad policies, but this is pretty scary looking out another 5 years. And if he ended up having any significant health issues between now and an election, then we don't know what's going to happen. And currently, Kamala Harris, his vice president, is, like often vice presidents, not heard from very much, and she's not considered to be a super dynamic politician. And so on both sides, we don't really know. If their election was today and it was Biden against Trump, Biden would most likely win. But there's a lot of time between now and then. We don't know. It theoretically could be somebody else. But that's not even discussing the House and Senate. It looks like there's a
so can you if we assume I don't know, let's hear maybe like a sort of 60% chance that if it's Biden v. Trump, Biden wins, and then there's like, the 10% chance it's somebody other than Biden, and maybe there's like I don't know, 30% chance it's somebody other than Trump.
I'm probably off, but I think if it's Biden versus Trump, I think there's probably a 75% chance that Biden wins. I've been wrong in the past on Trump, obviously in 2016, but I think that even if it's essentially Trump tried to take down the government. He's got so many cases against him that he may be able to postpone them, push them out beyond the election, but even some of the cases have other parties who will have already most likely lost by the time the election comes to being, like in the case in Georgia, which was about election interference. 2 people are already will be going to trial in October. I don't know when he will be, but I think there's enough things that independents are extremely, extremely unlikely to vote for him, and also Democrats and independents would turn out en masse just not to see him in. And I think, like in the case of Biden, it's more like, well, this could be a lost opportunity if he actually gets to the point where he can't. Let's say if he declines mentally, and hopefully at some point he would step down, and but people have a tendency to stick around too long. But it still wouldn't be okay. This is going to be a person who's actually actively trying to destroy government, destroy the Constitution, to essentially, like in the last time, overturn a proper election. So I think that's why I still think that Trump would have an extremely difficult time winning. And it's even if Biden was like Mitch McConnell now, having these 30-second pauses where he's just like blank, I'd be like, okay, I would rather 30-second pause of blankness and the person not knowing how to respond than somebody who's like actively trying to take down the government, who's doesn't care at all about national security, about seems to be more interested in. I mean, obviously, I'm biased, but I'm not biased this way against all Republicans. I would say like he's pretty well on the side of.
So yeah,
Putin, I mean, it's like that's.
What do you think?
I can say
so then, what's the chance? What's the chance then of whatever level, like the U.S. support stays the same next summer? Like,
so the chance that U.S. support stays the same next summer, I would.
Does the House cripple that, or like? I mean, you can also say you don't know. I think this is quite hard for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to say 40% chance that it stays the same as next summer. I think that it will reduce. I think it'll still be strong. I don't think we're going to make it disappear, but I think it could be.
So and that 40% includes increasing, right? So it's like 60% chance it goes down.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that this is just obviously unknown, but I would say that there's a 40% chance the level of funding will have reduced by at least let's say 15% from what it currently is, its current rate.
Okay, so let me get that down. That was 15% decrease, 2% plus decrease.
50%
and what chance
plus
did you give that?
Decrease. I was going to say I'll give that a 60% chance that would actually happen.
Oh, that's specific. Oh, that's that's good. That's
So I think it's likely, and part of that is I think if any of it needs to go through Congress, I think Congress will be under quite a bit of pressure from the extreme wing. And I still see support for Ukraine in America. I still know many people who are very actively wanting to support it. But there's also just fatigue over time, and unfortunately, the current slow progress that Ukraine has made, even though it is progress and it's meaningful, it's even meaningful that they haven't been that Russia hasn't gained on them. I mean, if you just look at it and say, look at the two countries and look at the size difference between them in terms of numbers of people available fighting. Like the West has been helping in bringing equipment, but the West isn't bringing soldiers there. So Ukraine has done well, even just to keep from being overrun. But essentially, like last fall, Ukraine was making a lot of progress, and I think people still just like backing a winner. They like backing something, where it's like, wow, we're putting this money in and we see big, fast results. And if you say like, okay, we're going to spend another 20 billion and they took 7 kilometers, even if those 7 kilometers are really significant, it's like, what? So I think it's harder to sell that to not only to American people, to Europe also. Right now, there's Poland. I think that this will pass fast, but Poland is currently saying that they're not going to send weapons until the grain issue is resolved, because Ukrainian grain is cheaper, and because they can't get it through the Black Sea, they've been sending it overland through Poland, Romania, through countries that also have their own industries, their own agricultural industry, and so the EU says no, you need to. The European countries need to accept this, and Poland said like no, because this is hurting our own domestic group. And as much as Poland is probably one of the strongest backers of Ukraine, they get into domestic politics, and they have an election coming up. So they have an election soon. Probably after that, things will normalize again. But yeah, I think it's easier. It's easier to be
U.S.
Go ahead.
U.S. funding. So maybe you think, will there be a fall by summer 2025? You think it's sort of maybe like 90%? Maybe you think it's like pretty high then?
No, I don't have that much. I don't have that much confidence in either direction going out to 2025, because one thing that I've seen projections saying that it's likely that in the next election, that the House, both houses may flip. That currently the Senate's controlled by the Democrats. That may flip to Republicans, just because in the next election the Democrats are in a tough position. They're defending more seats. So for those who don't know the way the U.S. Senate works, senators are elected for 6 years, and every 2 years there's an election where 1/3 of the senators are up for re-election. And depending on who's up those 2 years, there may be a lot of Republicans or a lot of Democrats. It varies. And then the next the election coming up, Democrats are defending more seats than Republicans. They have a greater chance of losing a few seats. And right now they have, I believe, I think it's a one-person majority. It's very small.
Yeah.
So it's possible that the Democrats end up losing the Senate and winning the House, and appropriations begin in the House. So in a way, that would give Democrats, and Democrats have been slightly stronger on Ukraine. I don't want to speak badly about Republicans, because a lot of Republicans have been really on board and helping, but they do have a minority of Republicans who have jammed up the works. And it's more likely that a democratically controlled House would continue to support the Ukrainian side, but it would still then have to pass through the Senate to get to the presidency. In general, even Republicans in the Senate have been more, I would say, more in favor. So the Senate tends to have less. To be a senator, you have to represent your entire state, not just some district. And to be a representative, you just represent one district in the state. So we tend to get more radical people on either side in the House and in the Senate. So even if the Republicans are controlling the Senate, I think it's more likely that they will still fund Ukraine than if they're controlling the House. So
I've just
so
found
basically
out
what I'm saying,
a new.
it's a strange technicality, but it's a strange technicality in the way the U.S. system works. But essentially, I would rather have, in the case of funding, Democrats controlling the House and a slight Republican majority in terms of getting things through for Ukraine. I think it's more likely to pass. Not know for sure.
So a slight majority in the Senate, then, is that what you're saying?
I think that I think that there will be a slight majority of Republicans in the Senate.
If you could move them around, you'd take.
If I was like, if I said one party it's going to be, one party's going to control one side, one party the other. Only in the case of something like Ukraine, I would prefer it to be Democrats in the House,
sure,
Republicans in the Senate. Obviously, when you get things like approving judges, I may have a different view, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if we've got many betting odds on this. currently Smart Goods has traded £34, so I don't really consider that to be a trustworthy
a liquid market.
A trustworthy, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to see whether I don't know whether Betfair also I might move on to Spectaculars in a second, just to sort of see what people. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, without wanting to get too much, and people can look on last week's episode, which you won't have heard yet, Scott, because it hasn't been released, but we're about to release it with Peter Wilderford talking about the House and talking about the US elections. I don't know if we talk about the House and the Senate that much.
Good guy, by the way. Yeah.
But you know, yeah, he's great and a great forecaster.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing loads of. I might look at Spectaculars as well, but
I'm basing part of this on discussions from Robert de Neufville, who has a Substack and also I podcast with whenever we manage to get around to doing that. So,
So let me see. House of Representatives. Doesn't it? Oh, great. Control of the House of Representatives 2022. Maybe Metakis. So maybe I'm surprised by the lack of questions on any of these. Who will be the Speaker of the House of Representatives at these? This is already resolved. It needs to be open questions. Will Republicans control the House of Representatives 2024? Metaculus puts this at really useful 50-50. Okay. So
Robert knows a lot more. So Robert's a lot better political scientist than I am as far as US. Just in general, I have a lot of respect for what he does. He writes a Substack, and that was his analysis, which is well thought out. That doesn't mean obviously none of us know for sure, but that's a possibility. And then once again, was to say with the presidential nomination, I think that Trump is an extremely weak candidate, but I also think there is a chance that this is why I think Democrats are foolish to not take this more seriously. I think they look at it and say Biden matches up well against Trump and is likely to defeat him. But if something happens that Biden's out of the picture, if something happens and Trump is out of the picture, then who knows? The current people like DeSantis, I don't think is doing very well, but we don't know. Like if they manage to get somebody credible, person who's probably not likely to make it, but Will Hurd is running and I think getting almost no traction. But Will Hurd is a former, I'm probably biased just because of dealing with analysis, but he's a former CIA agent who is actually I think pretty well. I think he understands foreign policy quite well. I'm not ideologically on the same. We're not on the same. We don't have the same background, but I look at some people like that who I say, okay, there are some people who have relatively reasonable positions that even if they're not from my party or my ideological bent, I think would mount a really strong case against candidacy against somebody like Biden. And so I think it's hard to say who the president will be, but I think if it's somebody like him, I think would continue the policy of supporting Ukraine against Russia. I'm really more concerned when I have people, whether it's somebody like Trump who thinks that he's going to end it in a day, which is silly. Why would you sit down and negotiate with, like, if you sat down with Russia today and said, okay, let's stop and end it. They'd be like, okay, fine. We want another 500, kilometers into Ukraine. Why, if you're willing to stop, why shouldn't we ask for more? I don't, basically wars tend to get negotiated when one of two things has happened. Either one side has been completely annihilated and, has nothing left, or you've had a stalemate for a very long period of time and neither side can make any progress. And so I don't see either of those having come to fruition.
I don't know how much more time you've got, Scott. I mean, I have to keep going for a while, but equally, I don't want to hold you. How are you doing for time?
I can probably go for another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know. It's so good for you. Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's try it. So that like leads us nicely into But let's just like blitz across a few of these. We'll just do some sort of
Sure.
rapid fires, and then we'll try and finish on these
Yeah.
negotiations. But I mean,
Good.
do you think there's going to be a huge increase in air power? What odds would you give to that?
Yeah, I think there will be. If we're talking about by, let's say late spring, which let's say the beginning of if I use the Afghani suggestion of the fighting season, I would say that by late spring there will be a huge increase in air power, and part of this is the F-16s
so maybe like
should be
60%?
65%. Yeah, and
Okay.
the reason for that is the F-16s should be around by then. The F-16 is, it's been around a very long time, but there's a few things that make it, I think, a superior plane to what's out there now, which is, at this stage, it's not about dogfighting super close up. There may be that may happen some, but essentially it has better radars. It has much better systems. It can fire more advanced missiles. It can essentially, it's not like if you just took F-16 and an Su-35 and said like, okay, go, go to an air show and do maneuvers. That's one thing, but I think it's got a lot of advanced avionics that would give it an advantage, and as long as it's supplied with the missile systems, it should basically force Russia to have to stay significantly further back. So
it seems remiss not to say, while we're here, do you have any 20-second takes on this lost stealth plane?
That's mind-boggling to me. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing I could say is, well, it's good about saying it's stealth. We can't find our own plane, but that's it's really odd. Like I would assume it had its transponder off, and obviously it is supposed to be low observable, so it should be hard to find where its radar tracking is. But there's something called I think it's called a Lüneburg lens, that normally when planes are not flying in combat, they'll put they have something that they put on them that makes them show up on radars. That then, if they're going to go into combat, they would take that off. But they normally have like something that's physically attached on the outside to make them appear. So I don't know if they were flying without that. But even if they weren't, I would have thought that another plane would have been in the area and at least known pretty close where it's going down. So that was, that one was mind-boggling to me. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Right. No, I mean, yeah, no, so, and just, you're sort of very, very convinced it's gone down, like it's gone down pretty soon after it. I guess I don't know how long these can fly for, right? Like, I don't imagine it got out of the US or something, but I don't know, like, did it go down 50 miles?
As far as I know,
down 200 miles?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but yeah, a plane can go on autopilot and fly till it runs out of fuel.
Yeah.
But the pilot, as far as I know, had already ejected, right?
Yeah. That's my understanding.
I didn't actually follow this one closely because I've been traveling and dealing with some other stuff, but I think that the pilot ejected.
I just thought,
I would even
had
think
somebody kind of thing. Yeah.
I would think that
very
it's
surreal.
I mean, I'm not an expert on radar cross sections of a plane after a pilot has ejected, but I would assume that after he's ejected, the canopy's blown off, and you're going to have some things that start reflecting radar
true.
signatures, at least looking from up above. So I don't know, just going.
That's a good point as well. I hadn't considered that either. I mean, I guess they're lucky that it happened in the continental US, right? Like, they could easily have lost this plane.
Yeah.
In some sort of like sea trials or something, and that could have been.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that people would have been trying to find it. Yeah, that was odd. But also, I know that it was near a couple of lakes, and they thought it could have possibly gone down in a lake, and then it would take a little while to find it. But yeah, I don't know.
So does Ukraine get more like anti-mine vehicles?
I think they should get more anti-mine vehicles. I haven't heard him asking for. I haven't heard D9s being something that was asked for a lot, but that makes they should.
But maybe not lots more. Like, if you think that's the bottleneck, is that not going to be the bottleneck? Maybe I'm not hearing like a lot of confidence.
It's not the only. it's not the only bottleneck, but it's something that would simply make them go faster. And I know I don't know that from personal experience, but from listening to to commanders who have worked with Israeli forces and Petraeus, David Petraeus, people who've done these things before, who've been involved in, whether it's going towards into Iraq or in Israeli operations and stuff like this. It's like, no, that seems like something that would not be controversial. So I don't know what the reason is for that.
Right.
But no, I would assume that they would continue to. I would assume that they will continue to get the sort of weapon systems that have already been approved. that are already working. I think that one area that's that's sort of an unknown or loose cannon in this whole equation that I didn't talk about, which I think is really critical, at least from my perspective, because I live in Romania. A couple Russian drones landed in Romania. It was not considered that Romania was a target, but Russia was striking a port on the Danube, which is a few hundred meters or yards away from Romania, because they're trying to interdict Ukrainian grain shipments. And so they're striking ports. Yeah. Well, they've had debris hit Romania. Romania's having relatively regular now alerts where they see, drones coming at Ukraine, but that are going to land within, hundreds of yards. So they end up having to, basically be under air raid alerts for hours. And they've had them land and, blow up on their territory. And then Bulgaria a few days ago had a drone. They found a drone that actually had like an 82 millimeter mortar shell on the drone, and it didn't explode. But and Bulgaria is far from the war, so that was probably something that just was really errant in its path. And immediately after, I was going to say immediately, a few days after So when this happened, so like NATO conflict. So immediately after this happened, with something hitting in Romania, there was a video released from Ukraine that showed like fire on the Romanian side, and I shouldn't laugh if they show fire on it. And
sure.
And immediately somebody from the Romanian foreign ministry was like, "Oh yeah, something hit." And then just a few hours later, the president and I think the minister of defense were like, "No, nothing happened," which I don't understand why they said that, because it pretty well destroys credibility on something that's going to easily be provable later. Then they made the wiser thing, which is like, okay, we're going to look into it. We're going to investigate it. That buys you a little bit of time, so you don't have to respond immediately. There clearly was a desire not to escalate, and I understand that. I mean, I think it's good not to, go on to full-scale war over mistake.
Do you have a sense of the chance of NATO? Because obviously, it has felt pretty unlikely for a while, but I guess if this is increasing, then maybe there is a chance that one of these countries snaps, and then maybe they don't escalate NATO, but maybe they do.
I don't think I don't think the country is going to snap. I don't think that Romania. I'd be extremely, extremely surprised if Romania snaps. I don't know him very well, but I do know the president, and he's a very measured person. So he's not somebody who is going to just have a fit of rage and do something. He's very thoughtful, methodical, and he also, I think, understands very well that whatever Romania does is done within the context of NATO. I don't know if he stepped down yet, but the Deputy Secretary General of NATO is Mircea Joana, who is Romanian. And the ties between Romania is a NATO country. They have very, very, they would work within the command structure of NATO there and the U.S. They're not going to just be like, oh yeah, we just went rogue and didn't like something and started, a big war on our own. But at some point, if drones continue to hit Romania, if missiles end up hitting there, even if they're errant, even if it's just because Russia's being incredibly risky by striking within hundreds of meters of a NATO country, that I'm like, I would think, at what point does NATO need to respond, not to try to start a full war, but should they try to strike the source of where the drone or missile came from? Like, do they need to do some sort of a kinetic response, not just like after this most recent thing?
And what chance do you think of a kinetic response from NATO, however minor?
So if it's another, I don't know, if it's a 10-pound, 5-kilo drone that hits somewhere and in a forest and, little smoke goes up, then it's probably a low response. It may be 10%. But if it actually, what if it kills a few people? What if it hits a building? What if it hits somewhere in a town? Then I think that you should be. I mean, I personally think that you should get it to the point where it'd be 40%, 40%. That not to like try to full on start a war with Russia, because that's, I don't think, a smart move. But I think in a way, if they know where it came from, to try to at least hit the area where it was launched from, no matter where that is, because to not respond is essentially to mean that NATO protection doesn't mean anything, and hitting within. Now, if Article 5 says, an attack on one is basically an attack on one is attack on all. So would the U.S. be fine if, if drones were landing in the U.S.?
Yeah.
And I don't think so. I don't think the UK would be okay if drones were landing in the UK at all. And that they continue to strike within 100 meters of your border regularly, and then occasional errant one go.
So you think the chance of at least a minor NATO kinetic response then, I don't know, you think it's somewhere between, I mean, I don't know, 1%
somewhere
and 10%.
Well, I'd say probably more than that. But I also hesitate to use the word NATO, because I almost don't see ever Hungary and Turkey signing on to anything. So when I say NATO, I'm really meaning like US, UK, all of the NATO countries, the Baltics, all of the Poland, whatever, all the countries that are on board with what's going on in Ukraine, which definitely does not include Hungary. So it wouldn't be like a consensus, but yeah. But I would think there would be some sort of NATO member countries involved in a kinetic strike as a response to more errant drone or missiles that hit NATO territory. Yeah, I'd put that somewhere probably between 10 and 40%.
And that's conditional
within the next 6 months. Conditional on Russia continuing to strike. That's conditional on things continuing to land on NATO territory. Think
that's not super. Yeah, I mean, how likely is Russia to continue to strike?
As far as I can tell, they keep doing it.
So maybe like,
they keep trying to hit
maybe like 70% or something. I mean, that's I think that's like another big take here, is that like there's like a NATO kinetic response is not that unlikely. Like a kinetic response from a NATO country.
I think that
is like,
it's not that unlikely. Yeah. So I mean, not that unlikely. It's less than 50%, but maybe it's like way
20%, maybe
20%. Yeah, but let's say 20%, because I figure Russia, for this to happen, Russia has to continue to keep striking near NATO countries, and then like they keep hitting Lviv, and Lviv is very, very far from the front lines, but it's being hit. This is on the western side of Ukraine, and it's about an hour and a half drive from Poland. But those, it's possible that something from there will be errant and make it to Poland. But where they're hitting in Romania or near Romania, that's hundreds of yards. That's crazy close. With systems that don't always appear to be very effective. Now, a lot of those are relatively small, but still, like how many times you get hit. Yeah. And the first response was to do a demining, which maybe they were going to do anyway, but they did a demining exercise on the Danube, Black Sea area. It was an interesting coalition. It was U.S., Turkey, I think, U.S., Turkey, Romania, Ukraine. I don't remember I think UK. I don't remember. There were not many more countries involved. I think I'm probably missing some country I should know, but that was done almost immediately. They did a 5-day demining and surveillance exercise, and U.S. apparently said after these recent hits that they're going to start flying F-16s regularly on the border of Romania, doing basically air patrol. But air patrol is not going to hit every single little drone that's hitting. Like, does the U.S. start shooting down drones over Ukraine? That are not yet to Romania. Like, it's because since the distances are so small, since the distance is only a few hundred yards between whether it hits Ukraine or Romania, at what point should they say, okay, anything within a 20-mile area or something of the Ukrainian border, they'll try to take down. I don't know. Which, I mean, obviously, even if you do that, at some point, some American anti-drone system will end up hitting a farmhouse in Ukraine. It's complicated. It's not a simple scenario, but that's an area that I'm continuing to watch, and also wondering if that will change a lot of the other scenarios. Like, would Americans care? Would this ever change the calculation in Congress? Would this change the desire to send more ATACMS, to send more planes, to basically step it up and say, no, we need Ukraine to win? Because until now, I think there's been this feeling like, okay, we want Ukraine to win, but however long it takes, and it's not really a big threat to us as long as it's this simmering war, over there, that we at least keep them, from losing and making some progress. So that's an area where I think it could escalate things for good or bad. Good meaning to speed up the end of the war, bad massive escalation, obviously.
Do you think so? What about control of Crimea? I'm hearing like 2024. You probably think is like pretty unlikely. I mean, if you gave 20,
you're talking about are you talking about by the end of 2024 or
by the start?
Not going to happen. Not going to happen. I shouldn't say not going to happen, but let's say 3%, 2%.
And then by the end of
the
end of 2024.
17%.
Okay.
It's a really hard one for me on that one, because maybe I should go higher, but I think that even if in a way it's like, is that the end of the war? I don't know. If the land bridge is cut, if the Kerch bridge is cut, and you basically have an area surrounded, it's siege. But I would assume they could last there a long time if they're willing to fight. Like, if the Russians there are willing to fight to the end, they should already have a lot of stockpiles of food and water stuff, I would assume. If they're going to be like if you look at even like the siege of Mariupol, the Azovstal plant, that was months long to take one plant, and Crimea has had, Russia's had more than 10 years, basically 10 years to build up defenses in Crimea. So I think that'd be a really difficult one to take. So
okay, and then I guess just like,
but there's a collapse. But the reason I say 17% is just collapse. I mean, there's always a possibility of complete collapse of Russia in the war. That's why.
I guess so. Some sort of final questions then is like, is China going to increase its, like, is there going to be a massive increase in support from China, do you think?
No, I heard
next summer.
I'd be extraordinarily surprised. Like, I just heard, and I didn't. So sometimes I'm just like driving, listening to podcasts and stuff, and so I don't get to back them up, what I hear. But I heard something about China is not allowing Russia to buy drones beyond a certain size, which was quite low weight. I don't remember what it is. Like, a lot of the small drones being flown in Ukraine are Chinese. So like DJI Mavic drones, which are really popular among Ukrainian forces, are ones you can buy off the shelf. They, good ones may run up to a few $1,000s. You can even get ones with infrared cameras for probably $3,000 or $4,000. But that scale Russia can buy. but anything larger, basically China is blocking Russia from buying. And so I think, and to me, that's a sign that China, China's pretty ambivalent in this, and China doesn't want to risk. China seems pretty clear to me. They don't want to risk their international trade. They don't want to risk their support among Europe, the U.S., any part of the world that would be that would care. I don't think. Yeah.
So you think
I don't see them supporting 10%? Russia very strongly.
You think
10%? Lower
10%.
So if you're talking about like them sending major equipment, like they start sending like tanks or no.
Okay, and then
I guess one thing that's obvious about that is I know that North Korea has a lot of artillery shells, and North Korea was supporting. Kim just took his train to Russia, but that Putin is going to North Korea as opposed to China to get that. That's a pretty clear sign that China's not exactly on board.
So then, I guess like as a final kind of question, maybe just to hear comments on more than the forecast, like we've got. Let's imagine the median scenario here. It seems like at some point, Ukraine, maybe like summer next year, Ukraine's taken Tokmak or somewhere like that. They've really disrupted ground lines. Maybe they haven't blown the Kerch Bridge, but they're damaging it. Crimea is starting to be starved out. Maybe they've made, a little bit of ground on Bakhmut, but probably like not that much. That seems like a sort of rough median scenario. Like, do you have any sense that then you go to negotiations? I mean, to my mind, like this war is gonna run and run without an increase. I mean, maybe Russia started to ramp up its production, but I think it's going to struggle a bit in terms of manpower because it's already having to it's already losing a lot from emigration, and then it's having to get all the people in terms of to be in the army. So it's going to have trouble ramping up its military production. So I don't know. Do you see an obvious route for negotiations and an obvious again? I look at the options for the negotiations and I think it's not really clear to me what mutually agreeable. Yeah, I guess you said it before.
I think Bakhmut can fall pretty. I think Bakhmut actually can fall. I don't think that's.
I agree.
But as far as
I don't know that they push that much past Bakhmut. Maybe they do, but
right. So I would look at it and say, will they take Donetsk? Will they take major? Will they take Luhansk? Well, those. I think those areas are still less defended than I think Crimea is the most defended area right now. The land to Crimea and Crimea itself. But I think going to the far. So I think if Crimea is essentially cut off, and there is some progress towards into the Donbass, that may be a stage, especially if you end up having a large number of Russian soldiers, Russian civilians in Crimea, unable to do anything other than just get hit. Then I think that would be a place where, Russia would either have to be like, okay, we just let those guys die. You'd also probably get international pressure, because if they look like they're going to get massacred, what does Ukraine do if you can't actually easily push them out, and so you just end up slaughtering them over time. I don't mean slaughtering them like what happened in I forgot Busha, but literally you're just shelling the city, like a siege. At some point, that may not become a good very sustainable, because currently there are civilians in the area. So, but as far as the eastern side, I could see at some point if you get to a point. I think that Ukraine is going to care a lot more about Crimea and access, and probably regaining Mariupol would be. I think regaining Mariupol would still be important to them. I think if it's some far the far edge on the Donbass, that may be a point where they say, yeah, okay, let's negotiate. Because I think the far eastern portion of the Donbass, even though Ukraine would, of course, like to regain all of the territory that they had in 2013, I think they may end up living to regret it if they got all of it, because I think there may be some some outer edge portion that doesn't want to be in Ukraine and becomes essentially like a separatist issue in the long run, like an internal problem for them.
So for you, the route,
seeing that part,
the sort of median route towards negotiations is that, like, in the near future at least, is that they take some level of control of Crimea, not fully necessarily, but they're really like pushing on it. They take Mariupol, I think,
So like either taking Mariupol or once again, probably taking it or getting to the point where Russia is, facing tremendous losses in order to, hold on to some piece of rubble,
then you think that, like, if we stayed static there for a long time, then there might start to be like, okay, we'll cede this land in response for I don't know something.
Yeah, okay. And when that will be, God knows. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know.
You're not optimistic for negotiations before 2020. I don't know, 2025. You think?
I would be surprised. I mean, I don't. This is going to be like a mad guess. But if I said like real negotiations in 2024, I might be at like 35% and 30%, and that's just based on things could get ugly. Things could get really ugly for Russia in Crimea, and then if that happens, will Putin still decide to negotiate? Like, consider if Putin's still around, like, at what point would they say, we're going to sit down and do this? And part of it depends on like how much they consider it integral to their country. I mean, one thing that just happened a day ago, was Armenia lost Nagorno-Karabakh. The Nagorno-Karabakh which is in Azerbaijan, it's like it is in the sovereign borders of Azerbaijan by international law, and there's this enclave that's almost all ethnic Armenian people. And for the last, I think it's almost 30 years, the country of Armenia has basically controlled it. And Azerbaijan has fought off and on for it, and they fought again a few days ago. And basically, there were, I think, 2,000 Russian peacekeepers there, and Armenia just finally gave up and said, like, they know that they can't defend it. Like, Azerbaijan is backed by Turkey. Azerbaijan is much stronger than Armenia. Russia's in no position to step in and block Azerbaijan from taking it. Now the Armenians are mad at at Russia, and also somewhat mad at their president. But basically, Russia's lost a lot of power. They're losing power in that region, and Armenia is a pretty small country. It's not that it doesn't have a lot of great resources. But I think, as the war goes on, if Russia sees that they may be losing more and more control in different parts of the of their borders. Like, I don't like right now we don't know there's rumors that Ramzan Kadyrov is very sick, and I haven't looked today, but he hasn't been heard from for a long time. And that's with Chechnya. If Chechnya, if you have different groups that start to rise up, if several groups start to rise up, on the borders of Russia, those are sort of unknowns that could change the calculation about when they would go to negotiation. I don't know, but that's like part of why I don't say it's like really, really low.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that gives us. I mean, so what are some sort of key takes here? I think there seems this kind of take about the actually ground lines being disrupted significantly, maybe before the end of the year, is like not that unlikely. And then some kind of NATO response, I think, will surprise people if that happens, but seems
but not off the table.
More plausible than people. That seems more plausible than people
more
think.
plausible than I would have
said
a month ago.
So I think like that seems. That seems, and just in general, this is going to sort of like just going to churn on for a bit, but actually things might look a bit more optimistic for Ukraine in sort of, a year or something.
Yeah, I think it'll be more optimistic, but I would be surprised if they've actually like regained all their goals. So
Great. Well, I mean, Scott, thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
Thank you for being so willing. I imagine we'll come back in 6 months again. I mean, maybe someday we'll have a thing where I show my forecast and you can see that. I think
that would be cool.
I think the first forecast I did a load of forecasts on whether they would take various parts of Ukraine. And I was just horrifically overconfident. I think I don't even want to look at what I said. I think it was January this year about when they took like Donetsk, and I was at like 35% or something.
One just brief thing I wanted to mention is a lot of the American policy early on was concerned about not provoking Russia into essentially a nuclear conflict.
Yeah.
And Russia said, this is a red line, that's a red line. No, they didn't say red line, but like, this, each thing can't happen. And then each step happens and there's essentially no response from Russia. And so, even the UK gave Ukraine Storm Shadow missiles. Russian sub is hit apparently by them, another Russian ship. In port, those were hit in Sevastopol, I believe in Sevastopol, and the Black Sea Fleet's port in Crimea, and nothing. There's no nuclear bombs going off. I mean, that's not to say that there may be some red line that we're not aware of, but basically, I think short of an invasion, an actual invasion of Russia, there don't really appear to be red lines that are going to, provoke Russia to much more. Other than every time something happens, they end up, bombing a bunch of civilian population, or like this winter they'll probably try to start bombing the power plants again. Just things that are sort of mean but don't accomplish much. That I think they can at least say, look, we made a response. You did this to us. We responded, and you lost some, apartment buildings.
I mean, I think
killed some people without.
Also, particularly in our circles, people were really concerned about the nuclear stuff, and that hasn't manifested.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't seem to have materialized. So
I'm going to be cheeky and
ask,
not
even like the movement of them. So yeah.
What do you think? So what's your sort of, I don't know, Russia launches a nuke number, and what's your Putin in power number, if you give those?
Okay, Russia launching a nuke. Oh, sorry, a nuke, doing a nuke test on their own soil, or launching or detonating a nuke on Ukrainian territory, or Ukrainian or other.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, the latter.
The latter.
So launching a nuke in anger.
And then now I say like 2%.
And then Putin in power at the end of next year.
Oh, sorry. Which time period?
Oh, that's great. Which time period were you thinking of?
I would say by the end of 2024, I would say 2%.
Yeah. I should keep the same as my nomenclature. And Putin in power in 2025. So the end of 2024. What's your chance Putin's in power?
Yeah. 85%.
Right.
Probably should be higher.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this gives us, I don't know, I'm never sure how to, if you said on this, listeners, you can, but something I think about a lot is like how to take these pictures and turn them into a picture. And I guess something I was talking to my friend Katia Grace the other day, and we were talking about sort of roots versus end points. And so some of these things, they're like very binary, will it happen, will it not? But I think it's starting to suggest some sort of root-like questions. Well, the severing of the land bridge, I think possibly severing of the land bridge has been over. I think disrupting the ground lines seems like a more interesting question. I think the Kerch Bridge possibly, because it was just like, I think predicted, got a bit too much, but like some level of control over Crimea seems like a more interesting question. Something about nukes, something about China, something about negotiations. And it seems to me that like we're starting to have language and pictures for these more sort of nebulous parts of the problem to say, what's the chance of these? And I that's something, and we don't need to go on about this, but that's something I think about a lot to think about, like, if you were going to have a dashboard of this war, and if you were going to have a sort of like,
it helps fill out why I think the more I look at all of these different questions you mentioned, different subtopics, also why I have, I don't have extreme confidence, but why I have more confidence that Putin will be in power, because I think if Russia hasn't been completely decimated by the end of 2024, like let's say if Ukraine severs the land bridge and there are still Russians in Crimea and they're fighting, and Russia still controls a significant portion of the Donbass, that doesn't seem like a scenario where things would have gone so crazy that that there would have been a huge push within Russia to get rid of Putin. And obviously there already was some sort of a push by Prigozhin, which didn't end very well, for him. And so right now it's like, where is a point where people within Russia are going to stand up and say, this is enough, we've got to kick this guy out? If Putin all of a sudden said, I'm going to mobilize everybody, like I'm going to mobilize 2 million people because we got to go win this thing. Well, he can't even do that, because even if he did, like there aren't supplies to send them. So you can mobilize more people to a degree, but you still have to have guns and bullets and artillery shells and stuff for them to use. So I don't know how he can disrupt significantly more, and unless he makes some screw up, like really provoking a NATO response where where the West meaning once again primarily U.S., UK, very strong military countries say like, okay, we're gonna really step in and enforce a no-fly zone or something. Like, I don't think he's going to be losing rapidly enough that it would risk toppling him in the near future. And that's part of why that number is
okay.
Well, I don't know. What's your rod on Putin right now to 2025?
Beginning of 2025, I think I think probably I'm at about 90%. I think. I mean, maybe I feel like a wobble around this Azerbaijan stuff, but like now that he's managed to weather the Prigozhin
domestic
stuff,
politics in Russia.
Now that he's done fine with the Prigozhin stuff, like like what is going to take things that happen keep happening. Putin seems to be like pretty good at staying in power. This hasn't this hasn't actually shown me like a clear like wobble in terms of his ability to. I mean, I've heard some rumors of health concerns, but then none of that has been substantiated. I did look into it a little bit, and it seemed like dictators who survived coup attempts actually lasted. I mean, I guess maybe you have to be there a long time to survive a coup attempt. But actually, like, it wasn't like the time from the end of your regime to a coup attempt wasn't actually particularly short. I seem to remember when I looked at it, it wasn't like, once you have the coup attempt, everything usually tends to end in a year. I seem to think it was like the median with that was like four, some sort of vibe like that. So I think that also, I mean, also I've been listening to Adam, I think it was Adam Tooze did a podcast, the Ones and Twos podcast, and I was listening to that a bit about Russia's internal manufacturing, and currently they seem to be doing okay.
They're
they are
stepping
still
up
managing to sell oil, like they've just shifted their oil sales around. It has been hard, but like it actually isn't. I think until I started to look into that, I thought Russia was in a really like hairy position, and that the ruble has really fallen in value, and that is going to have some like knock-ons, but it's not clear. It's not like the country is like honestly, and Russia's debt to GDP ratio, I seem to think is just tremendously low, which maybe just like Putin is just has.
You can look at
Iran
as an example. You can look at Iran as an example where trying to isolate a country economically had an effect, but it also made their country resilient because they had to learn how to do a lot of things on their own. And they obviously do have trading partners that they haven't been completely cut off, but they've been around a long time. So
Yeah,
Yep.
and so,
So
will it be a bit difficult for Russia? Sure. But,
yeah,
is that
yeah.
going to be the end of Putin?
Mhm.
I don't... also, I think the Prigozhin thing just made me, less optimistic on my ability to understand the actors within the space and exactly
Yeah,
how they were
yeah,
thinking or feeling, seeing as his actions
yeah,
seem so alien to me that
yeah,
I guess I've been a bit more like, well, the base rate to look at is just Putin's been in power
yeah,
a long time.
yeah.
He seemed to doubt, it doesn't seem like you're hearing rumors that he's on his last legs. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not hearing about people coordinating against him. So,
And
um,
Kadyrov was the other person. I don't think that Kadyrov had the ability to take out Putin, but I thought if Prigozhin and Kadyrov were working somewhat in concert, even though Prigozhin is Chechen, not Russian, I thought, okay, those are people who have their own militaries or militias. They fought with Russians, and maybe if they've been pretty outspoken at times about essentially trying to be, tougher than Putin. And it
yes.
seems that both of them, well, obviously Prigozhin's been defanged, but it looks like Prigozhin has, but it looks like Kadyrov may also. He's pretty quiet, so yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and
So
I think also, I don't think it's beyond possible, but if the US Trump wins, which I guess I think is a bit less likely than you do, particularly with his recent discussions on abortion. I think possibly if Trump managed to really moderate his stance on abortion and be sort of saying, yeah, hey, I could look towards some sort of more European style, I don't know, 15 to 25 weeks bill. If he managed to do that, I could believe that independents could come back. I don't know what independents are going to think about the trials, but it's not. I think
or realize that he actually,
pushing me.
or realize if they're completely illiterate and have no memory, and realize that he actually put the judges on the court that got this thing going in the first place.
Yeah,
but a lot of times people have short memories. They do.
Yeah, but also just he's a master of vibes. He's a master of
Yep.
of sort of giving people. I think it's underrated how much he moved to the left in terms of Medicare and the Republicans really I think screwed themselves in the midterms, both with abortion, but I think also there was some stuff about what they were going to do with Social Security. And that's just not an error that I think Trump would have made. I think Trump just
no, he understands that sort of thing. I think he understands that. And he has no ideology of his own, I don't think. I think it's just, whatever he thinks.
Whatever makes the crowd.
Works. Yeah. So.
And so there does seem, I don't know, I'm not much different than you, but I'm a bit more. And then, if Putin sits there and thinks, hey, look, all I've got to do here is just hold out for 2 years and then slowly support for Ukraine dries up, then I just grind, so even if we have the median situation where Crimea is kind of half under, Crimea is, it's uncertain, we're pushing towards Mariupol, I guess I think there's also a plausible world where then things run dry. Putin has been just sort of holding on, and then he just slowly kind of salami slices his way back, and then you see in 5 years' time that somewhere between the current position and Russia, we sort of pause, and then there is a ceasefire or something, and I think that would look. I don't know. I don't really have an understanding of how that would look in Russia, but to the rest of us, that would actually look I don't know, maybe a minor loss, maybe a minor victory. But I think possibly a minor sort of moderate victory for the Russians. You'd be they threw a lot of stuff, but they now control Crimea. They control much more of the Donbass regions. They control Mariupol. Okay, sure, Ukraine pulled some of it back. They even managed to cut the sausages we've been discussing, but I think, and that wouldn't seem at all destructive to Putin's image to be he won again, or he eked out a victory.
Good,
cool. Well,
so
again, thank you so much,
I enjoyed
Scott.
it.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.